Please go ahead.
Okay.
So with that, we would like to welcome everyone on behalf of LAF and LPPDE, this webinar with Gwendolyn Galsworth, the super specialist in visualization. So get your well seated to learn and to discuss afterwards. So take it away, Gwendolyn.
Yes, take it away. All right, great, thank you. Well, I'm very pleased to be here, as usual, with two people who are becoming my friends, and one, Mohammed, who is somewhere in the gallery. So I know some friendly faces. Juha, thank you very much for the invitation. Peter, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to be making remarks today about an aspect of visuality. I'm going to begin to share my screen. Just a moment, because we were figuring this out, and I think, good, thank you, very good. Just a moment, please. Good. I'm going to be doing a workshop in a few weeks, first week in October, at the Helsinki conference with these fine gentlemen. And what I'll be doing is looking at the spectrum of what visuality is, as I've been developing it since the 1980s. I've worked to codify the field and to find its principles and to make it a robust strategy for improvement. A lot of people love visuality, love visual devices, and they think of the visual workplace as visual devices. Indeed, it is so much more. Visuality is a language, and the vocabulary of that language are the devices themselves. But as a language, as you know, a language exists beyond just the words. It's how those words are put together, whether you're reading a menu or reading poetry. So the words can be used in many ways for many purposes that are beyond just the word itself, just the words themselves. And visuality is like that. So I want to begin and bring you through this presentation because it is, for me, in a very specialized way, a look at visuality for leaders. I'm presenting to you right now the companies that I've worked with over, some of them anyway, over these many years. They cut across all industries and all businesses, healthcare, army depots, manufacturing for food, for automobiles, for parts, for sneakers, biomedical, everything. And the reason why we have been able to work in so many different companies without hesitation, including design offices and laboratories, is because visuality is the base of information. Visuality is about information. I'm affiliated with the Shingo Prize, as some of you know. Visuality is about information. It is about the informational landscape which exists in every workplace. And in fact, the workplace cannot exist without the information. So pull is important, flow is important, Kanban is important, but underneath that, the very ground of all work is a flow of information that must be timely and complete and accurate and exactly when you need it. So I want to invite you to take the big view. We'll have a window on this today from about the executive leader, but it is only a window in a vast, really, mansion of rooms and connectivity and functionality. And that's called the visual workplace, of which visual management is a subset. I want to invite you to think this broadly about this by presenting this picture and this thought, which is the challenges that a company face, that maybe your company is facing right now, may seem like big challenges. And that's one way to look at your day, your work, your outcomes. But there's another way. And the other way has to do with this. Are they your biggest opportunities? They may be very big problems, but in fact, are they the biggest opportunity? Is the way to address your problems by solving the problems or looking at the opportunity that they represent in their solutions? So it's a little bit of an esoteric question. I've been living with this question about 20 years, and I find it to be very interesting and useful for my purposes when I go into a company and I do an assessment. What I want to see is beyond the problem landscape. I want to look at the information landscape, and I want to see how companies are, whether or not they are using it deeply or using only the part that, in a sense, is published. Again, as an intro, so I can widen the lens, so we can have a wide conversation about these possibilities, these opportunities. A visual workplace is populated not by hundreds, but by thousands of visual devices. This is a fully functioning visual enterprise. And those devices, and also clusters of devices, which we call visual systems or visual mini systems, are invented by the workforce that works there because they are a workforce of visual thinkers. These devices, populated by the thousands, are invented by a workforce that knows how to think visually because they're creating that language. They are creating the informational interventions that allow them to do their work accurately, completely, for the right reason, because they know it, and to be able to improve it as well. Visuality provides an instant feedback loop. I just want to show you some visual devices in action. We have over 100,000 devices that we've collected over the years, but some of them are so pristine and so clear and so, in a way, universal, whether you're in an office or in manufacturing or in an open pit mine, that we use maybe about 6,000 or 7,000 of them, of these 100,000, to teach through. And you'll see some of my favorites here. Some of these we will encounter today. During the workshop, we will see well over 300 visual devices, and we will look and study them, some of the teaching examples, so that you can then understand how the device works and what powers it, what is its level of effectiveness, and why. That'll be in the workshop today. We're just going to kind of show this to you and complete our definition here about this workplace, this visual workplace that's invented by a workforce that knows how to think visually. What is visual thinking? This is a protocol that I discovered many, many years ago. It was about 1994, 95 when I was writing my first book, Visual Systems. And I realized that for visuality to work, it needed to have a driver. It could not be of the imagination. It could not be just, oh, I've seen this device before and I think I can use it in my workplace. It had to be able to be invented because people understood the mechanism of information sharing. So this is what we use. What is visual thinking? It is a system of thinking. It is the ability of a person, your ability and mine, the ability of a person to recognize motion. Motion is the footprint of missing information, to recognize motion and the information deficits that trigger that motion, that made that footprint, and then to eliminate both through solutions that are visual. So what visuality is about, and we'll talk about this in a particular perspective today about the executive, about transformational leader, a visual leader, is the informational landscape when in the pre-visual workplace is pretty much empty. So what you have is missing information as the enemy, but missing information is even more than invisible. It's not there. the predator, this is Schwarzenegger's film, was invisible. He had a mechanism that made him invisible, but that's not that way with information deficits. Missing information in the workplace really isn't present. It isn't there. You can't find it, but you can find the symptom. It triggers motion. So we will be teaching this at the workshop, and you will have many takeaways that you can take home and immediately begin to experiment with this paradigm. It's extremely useful, but that's where those devices came from. I showed you about 50 devices on the previous slide. So this is a plug, but Peter already made it for my workshop. I hope you come. We are going to be looking at all of these devices. Some of them will be clusters. I'm not promising that we're going to be diagnosing all of those, but the purpose is to give you the foundational understanding of how visuality and visual thinking works, also to place where visual management fits in. It fits in for about 10%. What's the rest of the 90%? Come and find out. And I hope you can join us. I'm very, very pleased to be doing this. I've moved to Europe in order to help consulting firms and training firms learn my work so that they can do this work themselves with their own clients. And I'm thrilled to have an affiliation with Juha and Peter. I want to give you this framework because it'll help us talk about the segmentation of visuality. It's captured in the book that you see, Visual Workplace, Visual Thinking, in its second edition, and that's available on Amazon. Please help yourself. And it's the doorway model. It's a segmentation of visual functionality by organizational level, and there are 10 doors, and there is a comparable organizational level that works, that is responsible for opening that door and populating what's on the other side with visual devices about that function. Value-add associates, operators, they use visual order, they use work that makes sense, which is my major book on operator-led visuality. It really is a manual. I recommend it highly. This is what we do when we work with the operators. We pretty much follow the book page by page. The book came out of the training system, but that's for operators, and they implement the visual where. That's the most important. They can do much more, but until they have the visual where in place, which is made up of border, address, and if possible, an ID label for everything that casts a shadow, that's the criteria for it, they can't think of higher level devices because the where is missing. Visual standards, which a lot of companies are doing through TWI. We don't have to work on that one. Most companies are beginning to understand they need to document their standards. Visual displays for supervisors, engineers, planners, and managers. And the doorway for today is visual leadership for the executives. Yes, managers and supervisors are also involved, but I want to give you some of the foundational thinking of that. And hopefully that will, in a sense, redirect your thinking about what a visual leader does. And then here we have pull systems, which include your planners and engineers and your material handlers, and Poka-yoke, major doorway for quality, very important. We have our own approach to that, and we think it's good. These are the 6 core doorways, and then in the next doorway, we apply it to the machine. We apply all 6 to the machine. If you're asset driven, then your machine needs to speak. And then for the office, and then for the macro environment, this actually doorway 9 gets triggered right away, almost, and open any other doorway, and you need to create linkages between departments. And the final doorway is really about integrating the process across many sites and across many locations, huge geographical locations. We're going to be looking at this. I just want to orient you because I don't want you to think for a moment that what we're doing is only for executives. So some commentary on visuality and the transformational leader. One of the most important distinctions to make when you are thinking about that level of function we call the executive function is to make a sharp, a clean distinction between leading and managing. There is a great deal of difference. And, I was asked this question once at a company. They said, okay, what is the moment of leadership that for you, you think is a telling moment, an important moment? Where do we find that first call to leadership, for example, in a visual transformation? What does leadership mean? Well, it means this. It means the decision of the leader to undertake that journey. We find leadership in that decision because it is a decision about moving forward into the future. It is not managing the present. It is using the present as a launching pad for the future. It's a really important distinction. If you have worked with even executives in title, you will see them doing something that is not quite leading. And I was inspired, this is way back in 1989 by Charles Turner and Florida Power and Light. This was the first company that won the Deming Prize that was not a Japanese company. And this is what he said, which is carved in my eyelids. The biggest obstacle to improving productivity is management's inability to recognize that it must lead the company out of its productivity problems, not manage it out. There is a great deal of difference. Leading means setting the vision, inspiring others by example, and following up to see that the vision is met. That's exactly what the decision about let's get visual, let's go through a visual conversion, a visual transformation, is exactly that quality. So I want to kind of peel the onion on this about what managing is. Managing is what I like to say is a peacetime activity. It is about maintenance. It's about creating short-term stability and a sense of safety. How important is that? It's very important. The managing behaviors are monitoring, tracking, and then checking again. Stay steady and maintain. Keep things going. Stay on an even keel. I know that you know this. Now let's compare it to leading. Leading is about growth and expansion. It is about advancing. And I chose these two words carefully. It is about mandatory progress, not the status quo, but moving forward by mandate. It may be an internal mandate to the leader, him or herself. We will, or even better, I want. We'll get to I want, I believe we'll have time in a short while. Leadership is about creating short-term risk and change for the purpose of transformation. So you have to have your eye on, this is a transformative decision. It's going to be a little bit shaky to begin with, but that's how we're going to get over the bridge and start moving into a conversion, into something that is a new possibility for us. If you will, what I said at the beginning, an opportunity. Yes, it'll solve our problems, but mostly it will give us the opportunity to grow. What does growth mean to you? And this is a question that I often ask executives. I ask it about their company. What does growth mean for your company? But what does growth mean for you personally? Leading is a personal transformation. It is about deciding and driving. Exploration, innovation, and acute accountability. Listening, looking for, gathering the evidence that the movement is forward. Tracking, understanding. It's a compelling, intentional journey. And you're going down the causal chain. Now, the causal chain is very close to talking about problem solving. Cause and effect, effect and cause. Except the leader is in charge of it. This is a topic that has come up in the last week several times with the clients that I'm working with here in the Warsaw area. And that is problem solving. What kind of problem solving methodology do you use and why? Oh, well, they use the 5 whys and something that looks like a fish and, kind of described. But it isn't like that. The decision about the problem-solving methodology is an executive decision because it links so closely to leadership. So, different outcomes, different means. Maintenance versus expansion, managing versus leading. I love this quote from our just recently passed on presidential candidate Ross Perot. He was just full of vinegar and sugar, and he was alive. He was alive. And he said this: people cannot be managed, inventories can be managed, people must be led. And that's it in a nutshell. That's it in a nutshell. So I want to transition now and talk about this need to lead, because many of the managers, including the managers who have arrived today, I know 3 of them, and I know at least 2 of them want to be effective leaders. One of them may be a little bit more relaxed, but I'm not so certain. Not so certain. Executive leadership is responsible for the corporate intent, finding, focusing, driving strategic growth. Yes, through tactical improvements, it's true. The idea of a natural leader is something that has infected our kind of business mindset for too long. This is somebody who has a charismatic personality, an exquisite business school education, Harvard, Wharton, something very impressive. But I know from my experience that almost any executive, manager, or supervisor can learn and master leadership skills by developing an understanding of how visuality can help. Mastering the principles and practices first, learning then applying. So I want to show you the array that I consider to be fundamental, to be core. So core that you really can't get to excellence without it, in my opinion, and in my experience. We'll look at tools for the executive, and we will combine managers and supervisors into something called supervisors only, to make the distinction very clear about the role of an executive versus the role of a supervisor. I'm just going to skim this, but I want to give you a taste of what happens when we introduce structure, which is a visual construct. Structure is the domain of visuality. The visual workplace is a physical workplace. There are always physical corollaries. It's a device, it's a mechanism. You can see it, hold it, change it, and it helps you. It's like having a partner. It's like having a partner with you all the time who is going to tell you what you need to know, and you're going to say thank you. So here are the 3 for executives: the Operation Systems Improvement Template, the X-type matrix, which some of you know, and the War Room, which is not the same as an Obeya. Obeya is the first step. The War Room is a driven format. You can call a leading or a leader's Obeya, and you can get that same quality in, but you have to start working differently with your metrics. Another visual mechanism. So these are the 3 for the executive, for the transformational leader. I will give you a taste of them, but I want you to more get the quality of them. This is not a training session, and some of you are already using these tools and probably using them well, because they're visual. The second piece is for supervisors, and they also have 3 mechanisms that are important. Visual displays, your metrics and problem solving, they're owned by the executive, but your supervisors operationalize it. Remember, we're saying managers and supervisors together, and the operations roadmap. So these are flat formats, but you know what happens when we're going to now just talk about the executive. When the executive starts working with their formats, this magical thing happens. Their brain goes on the piece of paper. They have to figure out that design. They have to figure out the mechanism. This is especially true for the X-type matrix. I do the X-type matrix very differently than most of the world. It is a singular activity of the executive obeying that matrix until that matrix begins to supply the executive with the information he or she needs to know to do something very special. We'll get to that in a moment. Well, I'll say it now. How do you say yes to the few and wait to the many? That's the executive's role. It has nothing to do with managing. How do I say yes to the few and know why? And wait to the many and know why? It's not your turn. I can't fit you on. For example, I can't fit you on the matrix. There's not enough room. I don't have the resources, or I don't have a tool, which is this little quadrant down here. I don't have a tool to get that particular project going. I got to do more learning. My organization needs to learn first. It's very exciting. The executive role is really a shift in identity, and I have seen it happen in a way that is really so thrilling, because you will see someone who is trying their best to manage when indeed leadership is called for, and they just don't know how to make that transition. You give them these tools, they get it, they own it, they want it. They want it. This is the array, those 6 that I just showed you, the array of visual construct that define and transform. This is the architecture of leadership, to identify and target priorities, key priorities, to link them to meaningful tactical actions and projects, and to drive them, not through KPIs. KPIs monitor. You need metrics that drive. That's a particular array, a particular protocol. Maybe we will do a workshop on that. It's better done on site with executives who are really engaged in company priorities. It's better done that way, Peter and Juha. But it's transformational, and it's the visual construct that is forcing us to think in a new way because it requires it. So these are set up. That's the way I use them. Set up to get the behavioral change. So much to be said about this. They develop these managers that transition into executives. They develop a compelling need to lead because they know how to do it now. We won't have time for me to tell you the story behind this idea of becoming a leader of improvement, pardon me. But it's an identity shift. And I want to just give you this as a kind of way of looking at the components of that identity. I'm just going to show you 2 components of it, because that'll be relevant to what we're doing here today. The identity I constructed through this hexagon. So there are 7 key components. And I started doing this work about 25 years ago because we were very successful on the operator level. Operators were engaged, they were contributing, they were inventive, they owned their work area, they moved far, far ahead of the curve in terms of taking responsibility for flow, for lead time, for quality, for their own work. That's what operator-led visuality does. Work that makes sense. The work made sense to them. This is it 5S on steroids? Some people have said that to me. Somehow or other, it's beyond 5S on steroids. It's sort of like the health of the whole value add level. So it's fabulous. But at any rate, we made such fabulous 15 to 30% increase in productivity, but it got stuck because on the macro level, where the executive was, there wasn't a resonance, there wasn't a connection. We couldn't get those changes to move up. So I said, well, I've got to work with those executives. That was about 25 years ago. And I began. I began to ask myself, what is the transformation of demand and control into inspired visual leadership? So we defined this demand and control, command and control, insist on and get actions and responses because of your position or your authority. I like that because we're about to obliterate it. We're about to shift the identity of this. We put as an anchor element lead. This is a different anchor element than with managers and supervisors. Their anchor element, by the way, is improve, but for the executive, it's lead. And that is this. define the vision. Can you hear Charles Turner? Share the vision, resource the vision, and go first. That's the hook, and go first. The anchor element of these 7 behavioral elements, it's right in the center, that describe and define the visual executive. So there's 7. And I'll just give you the next one. Lead is the anchor. And the first thing you got to learn to do is decide. And that's where these constructs come in. You can't decide until you can get things to split into 2. I used to be a Latin teacher. Decidere. It means to cut in 2. It means to cut in 2. You have to be able to have oppositional understanding. Even if they are similar goals, you have to find the oppositional dimensions of these decisions. It's the hardest thing to do. So Peter and Juha, I have I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I hit the wrong button here. Why did that happen? Let me just think what I did wrong here. I'm going to stop my sharing. I'm sorry. And I'm going to do it again because I hit the wrong button. I think I was here. This should do it. It didn't. Oh dear. I'm afraid you're going to have to edit this out because I told you that I'm technically very clumsy. Just a moment, please. Let me just figure this out. I think I'll do this the old way. Yeah?
It's a visualization problem. You have too many screens.
I've got 3 of them, yes. So I'm going to do this. Here's one that'll help me. Darn it. Just a moment. Share. And now I'm going to get rid of this. And now we're in Sweden. And I'm just going to bring this over here. Can you see my PowerPoint, Juha? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to open it like this.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Well, we're just going to do it like this. To decide, to search out, formulate, resource the right direction and actions for improving your company. Your job is to become a leader of improvement. That's the executive role. It's also supervisor role. So I present Churchill, and believe me, in Poland, he is not a popular figure. He really messed up Yalta. I know that. I read his book. I liked him before I read the book. When I read this book, and it's the abridged version, 750 pages, it just astonished me because this gentleman was waiting, as you know, his entire life to lead England. And he had decisions to make that were impossible to make, and he paid dearly for them. He had to say yes to the few and wait, some of them, for a very long time to the many. And he embodied this. And yet he still was a visible leader. He still faced up to going public every time he made a bad decision. He got out there again. He sometimes confessed, he sometimes explained, but he was stalwart and true and ready to take responsibility and accountability for a gargantuan challenge. Shingo was the same way. And Ono, I had the pleasure of meeting both of them on trips to Japan that I used to take. But I want to tell you about this. These were co-architects of the Toyota production system. They were not patient, they were not warm, they were not affable. They were decisive, they were driven, they were drivers, they were not pleasant. I was around these guys. Ono was a nightmare, but he had different story, longer story. I call these 3 gentlemen Barracuda leaders. They respect humanity, which is actually the correct translation from the Japanese. It isn't respect for the individual, it's respect for humanity, which was translated respect for humans. What does that mean? It means individual. So it kind of lost its shape in the translation into English. But the Japanese is respect for humanity, the big picture. But they are always hungry for lunch, just like a barracuda. You can't feed these fish because they never go away. They always want more. They're very demanding. But that's the way these leaders are. And this is what we want from our visual leader. But the problem with many executives that I've encountered is they haven't conceptualized what's next. They are not able to say what's next. That's the big test. You think somebody is a great leader, just ask them what's next. And whatever he or she says, just say, okay, and after that, and next after that. This is also a hallmark of a great consultant. They always know what's next. They always know what's cooking. So I'm going to stop now so that we have, that's what I call a natural leader. But I just want to say, Ono and Shingo could be very polite, but while they were working, you really got close to them at your peril. But they were really huge human beings and full of compassion. That was one of their drivers. It was because they were full of compassion that they knew they had a limited amount of time and they better get busy. Just astonishing people to be around because they never wavered. Anyway, I loved our encounters. Others are always watching. They want to learn from you, executives. What are you teaching them? So we'll stop there, and thank you very much. And I think Juha and Peter will move to questions. There may be some. If there aren't many questions, we'll just move back to this and use our time well. Yeah, I'm going to turn this over to you now. I hope this has been helpful to you.